Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod to preview Michigan State's upcoming game in the Champions Classic against the Kentucky Wildcats. Quick reminder to head over to our support page and join the legions of supporters of the show who allow us to bring you more and better content. Supporters like those on Patreon at the Meteen Cleaves level: Bill Church, Brian O'Donnell, Michael Bosnick, Chad Hickey, Mike Huntoon, Scott Driscoll. Those Draymond Green supporters: Adam Walzak, Dan Rankin, Jim L., David Brame, Paul Marsh, and Greg Bamer. And all the Scott Scout supporters on Patreon, as well as Rich Wagenheim, Kenneth Cromet, Roger Bronsick, Al, Michael Emmerich, Joan VT, and Jim Rainey on Substack. If you want to support the show, head on over to our support page at tffinots.com/support to get the links. And also as a reminder, you can get an ad-free audio version of the show if you are a paid supporter to the show. All right, Rod. So Michigan State has played in the showcase since 2011, where Michigan State is a 5-9 record. They're 2-2 against the Wildcats, but 0-4 at Madison Square Garden in New York. Spartans won the last matchup against Kentucky in double overtime with a couple of game-saving plays from Malik Hall. I feel like at the end of regulation and the end of the first overtime.
I think you're right.
Kind of a little surprising to me that this event's still going. It's scheduled now through 2028, so this is the next cycle, I guess you'd say, the next 3-year commitment. It's not for lack of interest, of course, but it's really because of the conference and TV alignments. It surprised me with those changes.
But I think
still going.
I hear you, and there was some talk about that, primarily Michigan State being the problem, because of course Michigan State is a member of the Big Ten,
right,
has no real ESPN affiliation anymore, whereas the other three do. But I think cooler heads have prevailed, and there's an understanding that this event really works.
Yeah. For
and
sure.
It does. Now it's a little different now than it was for most of its existence, where it kind of was the kickoff to the college basketball season, where obviously Kentucky's played 4 games, Michigan State's played 3.
Right.
Before this. I'm not sure whether that's something the network pushed or the coaches wanted or both, but I think it loses just a little bit because of that. There was something to it being your first or second game. Sometimes teams had started after a few years of the event, had started playing a warm-up game before it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's lost too much. It's still a big deal. And you see every year it gives all 4 of these teams a very reliable level check.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean everything, but it does mean that you get a pretty good idea of where your flaws are. I think last year for Michigan State, playing that game and losing to a Kansas team that didn't play very well itself and ended up not being very good by their standards, it said something. And I think Michigan State, let's put it this way, Michigan State was never worse last year than they were in that Kansas game. They got better. They went to Maui a week or 2 later and were significantly improved, I thought. Even though they lost a game out there, they were still better. And it just went up from there. And that's what you hope for. So the fact that you got 4 big name programs that, pull in. I mean, I saw Michigan State's game last weekend against Arkansas.
Yeah,
the highest rated game, most viewers that Fox has had for college basketball in, I believe, more than a year.
Yeah, 2024. Yeah,
right.
Gonzaga, Connecticut or something. Yeah,
but I think it was that says something. We all know that Michigan State gets eyeballs.
Yep.
And of course, the other 3 programs in this do as well. So it's still a great event. I'm glad they've kept it going. I hope they keep it going for the foreseeable future, because I think it helps, again, on court and off court, it helps all 4 programs.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any question. Highlights them and helps with recruiting, and you're guaranteed a big game. And I think now with the I guess the receding multi-team events, we're going to see that this will be a little more prominent, I think. And if for teams who are wrangling to get into games like this, like Connecticut, and I think there are plenty of other teams that could make a case for being in a showcase. North Carolina being an obvious one too. UCLA.
Well,
maybe.
But they are part of another showcase. There's
right.
Another
That's
event.
just it. You can have other ones, and teams are much more willing to do home and homes now. I think a lot of the big game matchups and the ability to have these is just going to be a lot simpler going forward, at least for the
Yes.
foreseeable future.
Yeah, but again, the night. It's
so let's talk about
funny to
Kentucky
me.
a little bit. Like you mentioned, this is their fourth game. They're 3-1 on this year. They had a couple blowout wins over Nickel State, Valpo, Eastern Illinois. I think they just beat last night as we're recording this on Saturday. They destroyed them. They lost to Louisville, cross-state matchup, which is great that they have still having those games. And they were kind of beaten easily by Louisville, by Cardinals. They kind of made a late push to get it close, but ended up succumbing to them. And just from some stats as far as Kentucky, they play pretty fast pace. They're 83rd so far this year. Of course, it's all very limited data, just with 4 games. They rebounded well. They've both on offense and defense. They're pretty good shooting from 2, not very good from 3, and they don't really shoot a whole lot of threes, but they're certainly not as bad as Michigan State shooting from threes. There's about nobody is in the country. They've been very good against 2s and 3s defensively, and they don't put a lot of pressure. They tend to run it more, and we talked about this earlier too. When Michigan State's played sort of 2 base kinds of offenses, we have the Colgate kind of really very structured offense, and then at Arkansas sort of freewheeling athletes. And Kentucky is somewhere in between, or at least they may have like bits of both. They have the athletes, and of course, and they play sort of more structured offense too. So it'll be a good test for Michigan State, and kind of see what happens.
Well, what they pose in terms of difficulties guarding them is when I've watched Kentucky under Mark Pope, it's a different story than the John Calipari era. There's a lot of cutting, there's a lot of movement. It's not just the spread the floor and go get it kind of dribble drive stuff that Cal tends to emphasize. It's not as if they're running 50 different pro sets, but there's just much more movement, ball movement, man movement, and less one-on-one, I'm just going to take you kind of stuff. And so that does make it more challenging. Yet, as opposed to a Colgate, certainly, it's much more like UConn in that you've got really good athletes, for the most part, running that stuff. So it is kind of elements of both, but it's a challenge. I mean, Mark Pope's tenures at both Kentucky, limited, obviously, 1 year, and then this. But BYU before that, he's typically had very efficient offenses. That's been his calling card. His defense has been very good, and I expect this one will continue to be very good as well. So it's not as if he's a one-way coach. But when I think of him, the first thing I think of is efficient offense. But they play efficiently while also playing with some pace. So that can be a tough trick to turn. In the Big Ten, to put it in a Big Ten perspective, that was something that Iowa did very well. They did a lot of things badly, but one thing they did well under Fran is they played fast, but they were very efficient. That can be tough to do. Ask the folks in Ann Arbor right now about that. And Michigan State has gotten better in that way in the last 2-3 years. Where they obviously are playing as fast as they ever have, but they're also playing fairly efficiently. They're not kicking the ball around in excess and, hitting enough shots, all of that. So, Kentucky will definitely test Michigan State's newfound defensive confidence that they've established over the last 2 games, as opposed to the exhibition season and the Colgate game. It's going to get a test in this one, but it's worth mentioning that Kentucky is also a very, very good rebounding team at both ends. We'll get back to that when we turn to the keys, but this is going to be a real test in that way. They're also a team that will want to play with pace, as I've said, so they're going to be a test that way. There's a lot of areas where Michigan State's going to get pushed, and we'll see how the Spartans respond. I think the big issue for Kentucky coming into this game is that it looks very, very likely, I'd say almost certain, that they're going to be without 2 projected starters. One for sure, their big man, Jaden Quaintance, who is a transfer from Arizona State. He's a projected first-round pick in the draft, and he's yet to play He's not expected to return until December, so he's out. MSU's not going to see him. Unfortunately for MSU, Kentucky still has 3 guys who can play the 5 who are all pretty good. So they're very well stocked at the post spots. So I'm not saying they don't miss him because he's an expected starter, but they're pretty well equipped, as I say, to withstand that. The one that is likely to have the much bigger impact is at the point guard. They got a transfer from Pitt this offseason, a guy named Jaden Lowe, and they really felt like he would solve their point guard issues. Last year, they had some guys. They had the Butler kid who was a transfer from San Diego State, and then they had I'm forgetting his name, the Swedish kid who transferred in from Arizona, I believe. And I can't remember where he is now. Anyway,
Larson.
he was out. No.
Larson? No.
Begins with a K.
Okay.
Anyway, those 2 guys were banged up much of the year. The Swedish kid the whole year.
Okay.
And so Kentucky, for as good as they were, really didn't feel like they maxed out because they were missing the guys they thought would run their team for much of the season. And I've seen some reaction from Kentucky fans already that they're in sort of a Yogi Berra-esque deja vu all over again kind of mode about this, because Lowe, who they really thought would give them a steady presence at that position, got banged up in the preseason. I believe he missed exhibition games and their opening 2 games of the regular season. He played against Louisville, and he wasn't spectacular, but he was out there. And so that was, progress. But then he apparently re-aggravated the injury in practice this week. So the latest that I have seen is that they were going to get a second opinion and were attempting to decide whether or not surgery was required. That doesn't sound like a guy that's going to suit up Tuesday night to me.
Certainly doesn't sound like a guy who's going to be effective all season, to be honest.
That too, because as we know, shoulder injuries, unless you give them a good long time to heal, tend to reoccur. That tends to keep popping out. And supposedly, from what I read, that's what happened. Like, it came out and they had to pop it back in at practice. So that does not sound good. I mean, it was one thing when it was Zed Key a couple of years ago for Ohio State.
Right.
Had it constantly going out on him. But that's a big man. You can kind of see how you'd get away. And even that, I think they eventually had to shut down, if I remember correctly.
You have to eventually get surgery on that. Yeah, it just gets worse.
But for a point guard, it's a much different proposition. I struggle to see how you're going to just get by with that. So, so that's a blow for Kentucky, and obviously of benefit to Michigan State. Now, Kentucky has guys who, even if they aren't what I would call pure point guards, they've got experience handling the ball, and I don't think it's going to be a disaster. But is it a limiter? Does it mean that Kentucky's not at the best they could otherwise be? Yeah, probably so. And when you're playing Michigan State, who has, in my view, in all the ways that really count, an elite point guard, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So we'll see how all that plays out, but that's the news on Kentucky roster wise. Still a very deep team. I mean, you're going to see as we go through next, all these guys, they got a lot of people that can play good basketball.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not as if they're coming in with no shot. Far from it.
Yeah. I've definitely taken care of a number of those kids who get the chronic dislocation of the shoulder, and it just gets worse. It never gets better. And every time you do it, it's more likely to do it again. I've taken care of many who get to the point where it dislocates in their sleep, and they, wake up and it wakes them up and stuff. Yeah.
So with that kind of sensitivity, then you translate that to what you're asked to do on the basketball court, and how often they're just even, say, minor collisions. If you're a point guard, how often when you're playing pick and roll is your shoulder moving into somebody, right? Somebody who's probably very big and very solid physically. Yeah, it's not a good equation.
Well, and also think about every time you drive for a layup, and there's any
Yep.
little bit of contact, how often do you see those players land on the ground and they're landing
Right.
basically on their
Right.
shoulder? Now
Yep.
you have to favor land on the right shoulder because if you land directly on your back, obviously that's not too. It's just there's a lot. The game is far more physical than I think people think. That I even appreciate it till you kind of watch it and think about it for a second. That there's a there's a lot of banging around. It's not you're not in pads like football, but you're definitely putting a lot of stress on joints and things as you collisions and hitting the ground.
And look, and Kentucky plays with physicality, and they're going to play a lot of teams like this one, like Michigan State, who also bring a physical presence to the court. So it's not as if you're playing, 1980s NBA Western Conference fun and gun. It's there's physical contact all the time in these games.
All right, well, let's kind of head on over to our lineup brought to you by the Brothers Adjusted Gunners, who will sponsor the play that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter on the Kentucky Wildcats this year, or this game, I should say. I imagine we're going to probably attract quite a few Wildcats fans who watch this video, so welcome. We'll see how things go. You're welcome to join us after the game as well, which it probably depends on the outcome. I feel like Michigan State's now like a part SEC. So this is our second out of 4 games against the Southeast Conference. So,
yep.
All right. So beginning with the starters, we begin with Denzel Aberdeen, 6'5", senior transfer. He was a key guy last year's team on Florida, winning the national title. So he's going to be probably the point guard, I guess. He's averaging 15 points a game this year, shooting 53, 38, and 89.
Yeah, and one note on this. When I put the previews together at 1:30 in the morning last night, the stats still had not updated. So these are rough numbers. They're pretty close. So especially Kentucky fans, don't shoot me. But it's enough that you get the flavor of who these guys are.
Right.
Aberdeen is a really good player. He was, I believe he was a key reserve for Florida. I don't think he was a starter, but he played a lot. Might have even been their 6th man. He played a lot, though. I certainly remember him being a factor on that team. Was very good, and it surprised a lot of people when he entered the portal and left. And my understanding is the primary motivator was NIL. It was money. So it's another one of these deals rearing its head. And I don't blame anybody. I don't blame the kid, all of that. He's won a national title now. He's been part of that. So it's hard to say that he owes Florida anything else. But for whatever reason, it's funny because Florida, I got a pretty good idea because at least one of the kids they signed in the portal this year, I've got a pretty good idea what his price tag was because I heard about it from the Michigan State end. There was the kid who transferred from Princeton, Lee, their guard.
Oh, yeah. The guy that
I've made allusions to this. I don't know if I've named him, but what I had heard
now you have
is that, there was contact made with Michigan State. And when the price tag came up, Michigan State said, okay, see you later. Because they did not because they theoretically couldn't afford it, but more that, as we've come to find the way Tom Izzo operates with this stuff, he's just not going to go out and spend stupid money for somebody he doesn't think he can justify as worth it.
Right.
And that was the case with Lee. So it's funny to me, and maybe I know that was the reason given, certainly by Florida people, as to why Aberdeen left. But they went out and spent a lot of money on other portal guys. So it's funny that they did, but who knows? I mean, there could be a host of shades of gray in all of this, but regardless, he's at Kentucky now. Kentucky, I think, is very glad to have him because now the situation that they're in, this is a guy who, even though you didn't plan on him being your starting point guard, you can turn to him and say, look, you got to run the show. And they still feel reasonably good about what he can do. He's a nice all-around player. I mean, I don't think he's a superstar necessarily, but you can't point to any facet of his game that he's not at the very least solid in. He's a solid defensive player. He's got a lot of experience. He obviously knows how to win, what it's like to win. He's a good shooter, maybe not a great one, but a good one, good size. And though he's not what I would deem a natural point guard, he's good enough that I don't expect Kentucky to just be hemorrhaging turnovers or anything
Yeah.
like that in this game. I probably watched about 20 minutes of their game against Eastern Illinois. It was just hard to stick with it because it was a mauling. It was a blowout. But watching him play, I didn't feel like I was watching somebody that they're trying to manufacture into that position, So he's got a lot on his shoulders now with this team, the way things are. But I think he could probably handle it well.
Yeah, I think there's one thing we've learned with NIL, and this probably goes for most things in life. It's usually far less expensive to retain someone than to get someone out in the open market. I mean, I think that's
there's that, but the shades of gray thing is I don't know what.
Oh, sure, you don't know the other stuff. Yeah,
and I'm honestly I don't remember the timing of it. If he entered the portal before they signed those other guys, I don't know. Because sometimes it could be a reaction to that. I mean, the kid who transferred from Auburn to USC, Chad Baker Mazzara, that was the story. He didn't like what they were paying to somebody new that was coming in, so he said, "I'm going to go get paid somewhere else," and he did.
Crazy times. All right, so second player we'll talk about is Colin Chandler, 6'5", sophomore, averaging 13 points a game on 57, and 83 shooting. Quite a shooter.
Yeah, and he's primarily, in terms of his scoring production, he's a three-point shooter. And obviously, as you're seeing from numbers on limited attempts this year, but he did it last year as well. So it's legit. He's a shooter. He's a major league shooting threat for Kentucky. But he's also another guy, although you wouldn't label him a point guard, pretty solid secondary playmaker. I think he's averaging over 3 assists per game thus far, and he's I think he might have a better ratio than Aberdeen has, assist to turnover. So he's another guy, and I would say he's at least a solid athlete. He's looked solid defensively to me. So again, another guy who can contribute in a lot of ways. He's a returnee, so he's got a lot of familiarity, having played a year for Pope, what his coach wants out of him. But the primary way he's going to show up on the Michigan State scouting report, I think, is as a three-point shooting threat, because that's the big thing that he does.
Well, it sounds like in some ways this is a little bit like Michigan State's backcourt last year, where you've got guys who can survive. You could survive with Akins, you could survive with Richardson as playing the point if you needed to. So got guys who can handle the ball. They're maybe not fantastic, but good enough.
The one difference is all these Kentucky guards we're talking about have size.
Yeah, right. They're all 6'4" here.
But yes, I think you're on the right track in terms of, even if they're, like we would have said that if Michigan State had been hit with a rash of injuries last year and they had to turn to Jace or to Jaden Akins rather than Jeremy or Trey as the point guard, we would have said, yeah, they're probably not natural point. That's not their primary position, but they can handle it. The team, the offense isn't going to fall apart. And I would agree with you. It's like that.
So the third player we'll talk about is Otega Owe, 6'4", senior wing, preseason SEC player of the year. This year he's not gotten out to a hot start. He's scoring 13 points a game, shooting 44, 27, and 82.
Yeah, and I think the 3-point shooting is the biggest disappointment, although I think they just expected more overall. He's never been an elite deep shooter, but they thought he was going to be better than what he's shown thus far. And I would say, based on what he's done, he transferred in there last year from Oklahoma and really took a leap. And enough that, again, preseason player of the year in a very, very good league. So where the expectation level is. And the assumption would be that at some point this year, he's going to unlock it and actually be closer to the player they thought, which was kind of a dominant offensive player. We just have to hope that doesn't come until after Tuesday night.
That's right. Then we'll talk about Mohamed Diabate, 6'7", 220-pound junior transfer from Alabama. He finally got going, I guess, last night. Scored 20 against Eastern Illinois, 7 boards. He's averaging about 12 points a game so far this year and 6 rebounds, shooting 68, 15, and 63.
Yeah, he's a really interesting player because he's one of these, slightly undersized foremen, but plays big. He's a rebounding force. He's very effective around the rim. He's athletic. He's tough. 6'7", 220-ish. So it will be interesting to me how the matchups go. And I wonder if at times, I would think at times you might see him matched up with Cohen. And that'll be an interesting. He's not an athlete at Cohen's level, but he is athletic. And he's solid and strong and tough and all those things. So that might be one to watch for. But I think there'll be other guys that'll guard Cohen as well. But I like Diabate, and he was a reserve, I believe, for Alabama, but one who was definitely solidly in the rotation, stepping into a little bigger role at Kentucky this year. And the East, they're gonna think that with some reason that maybe the Eastern Illinois game is what gets him operating at a little different level. He was fine in their first 3 games, but Eastern Illinois was something of a breakthrough, and they're going to hope that that's a sign of things to come. But a very good player. If he ever figures out the deep ball, look out.
Yeah, he kind of takes the stretch out of stretch 4 right now, but that can certainly turn around. And the 5th and final player here playing at the 5 is Brandon Garrison, 6'10", 250-pound junior. He's a returner from Kentucky, averaging 7.5 points a game, 5 rebounds a game, shooting 75, 0, and 83.
Yeah, and the 0, I think he's taken 1 or 2 3-pointers. Not a strength of his game, but you see from that number, 75% for the floor, Garrison knows who he is. Yeah. He transferred in there last year from Oklahoma State, and he was a highly regarded player in high school. I mean, it's a natural that he would be a guy in position to play starters minutes or at least significant minutes at Kentucky. I don't think they expected him to be the starter, and what they're losing without their projected starter in the lineup thus far is maybe something at the defensive end in terms of rim protection. Despite his size, Garrison's not a big shot blocker, but he occupies a lot of space, and you like having those space eaters in the paint. And so he is making positive contributions defensively. It's just not in entirely all the ways that they anticipated for that position. I think eventually he probably moves back to a reserve role, but this is a pretty good player. Again, he knows who he is. He's making contributions in all phases. So again, another solid player.
Not only is it important as a player to know who you are, but as a tradesman, it's important to know who you are. And the Brothers Suggested Gutters, they know who they are. They just focus on gutters. They only do gutter work. They don't try and upsell you, do other things. So head on over to our support page at tffinots.com/support. Whether you're on the east side or the west side of the state, you can have the brothers come out and fix up your gutters. They can clean them out, get all those leaves out of there that have been falling, and now pretty much off the trees when I look around. Outside the oak trees, which never drop their leaves until the snow's down, and it's very inconvenient. They'll come up, they get on the ladders, clean everything out. They can repair things, replace them. They can put the leaf guards on, so you don't have to go through this routine every year. Whatever you need done, the brothers can take care of it. 10% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate. Do it today. You'd be glad you did, whether you're on the east or the west side. Kurt and Greg will take good care of you. All right, so moving on to reserves then, we have Malachi Moreno, 6'11" freshman, great high school recruit, a lot of expectations, averaging already 10.5 points a game, 7 rebounds a game, shooting 59% from the floor, but only 42% from the line.
Yeah, that's really the only disappointment from him in the early going. He was a McDonald's All-American. He was a highly rated recruit. Believe he was, I think he's from Louisville, but he's definitely from right on the Indiana-Kentucky border. And I know Michigan State expressed some early interest in him, but it apparently didn't get reciprocated because they were never really in that recruitment. He struck me as a kid who wanted to play for Kentucky.
Makes sense.
All along. And yeah. And for as good as they thought he was, I think he's maybe even been a little bit of a surprise as to how well he's played. Again, everything except free throw shooting. He's big. He's long. He's got some bounce, some springiness to him. I really like him. The couple of times I saw him in the Louisville game, and I saw him a little bit last night against Eastern Illinois. He's going to be, in time, I think he's going to be really good. For now, he's a good freshman. And, it's adding to that interior depth that when they're at full strength, you might not have – there may be better teams than Kentucky. I think there probably are nationally. but there might not be maybe outside of Purdue. It's the only one that comes immediately to mind that might have a post group that you would say is better and deeper. But Kentucky is going to be right there. And this kid's one of the reasons why.
Then we move on to another freshman, Jasper Johnson, 6'5", plays the wing pretty much. He averaging 7 points a game, but a pretty good assist turnover ratio, 7-2 so far this year. That wasn't this year. That was last game. Yeah.
Right.
And shooting 38, 37, and 80. So pretty good shooter too for freshman.
Yeah, he had a hot game last night. That helped elevate his shooting numbers. But another guy who you might not have said was your answer at the point, although they may have planned on him playing some reserve minutes there. It's possible. I'm not certain of that. But he too, he doesn't look out of sorts when they put the ball in his hands. Let's put it that way. So he's going to provide help both on and off the ball. The amount of help is maybe elevated a little bit in Lowe's absence, but yeah, off to a nice start. Another freshman along with Moreno that is giving them something right away.
And no team would be complete without someone from Eastern Europe. So we have Andrija Jelovic, 6'11", 225-pound sophomore from Croatia. So he's in his first year of college basketball, but he's played professionally. So I may assume he's like 40 years old. He's averaging 8 points a game, 4.5 rebounds a game, shooting 57, 20, and 67.
Yeah, they think the deep ball will eventually get dialed in. He's off to a rough start, although I saw him hit one last night that looked very smooth. They think he is going to be a stretch threat in the long run. But again, in a 6'11", 225-pound body, when everything is set and they've got everybody back, this might be your fourth big. Yeah. Pretty good for a fourth big. Yeah. This kid can play. This guy, I shouldn't say kid. Right. This guy can play. And that's, again, great depth for Kentucky to have a player that size and maturity who also they think will show that he's got some shooting skill.
Second tallest people in the world are the Balkans after the Dutch. So moving on then to Cam Williams, 6'8" sophomore transfer from Tulane. He started 28 games as a freshman. He's averaging 3 points a game, 3 rebounds a game, shooting 40, 30, and a perfect 100 from the line.
Yeah, and a kind of a classic portal story that we see all the time where somebody, these days at least, where somebody starts out at maybe a little lower level. And Tulane's not, that's not Eastern Illinois, but it's also not Kentucky. And he played a big role at Tulane. Now he's in, maybe a 12 to 15 minute a night role at Kentucky, but he's a sophomore. So he's got time to grow into maybe something bigger there on a bigger platform. For now, providing some depth, kind of a hybrid 3-4 guy at 6'8", but solid depth player.
And finally, Trent Noah, 6'5" sophomore from Kentucky. He's shooting 38, 29, and 0.
Yeah, I would expect that 29 is going to rise, though. He's just back. He played against Louisville, but essentially a cameo. I think he only played like 8-9 minutes. Played much more last night. I think he broke 20, and gave them some production. Although the 3-point shooting wasn't super accurate last night. That's what he's known as. He's known as a wing with some size who could shoot. I mean, you look up and down this roster, we've gone through 10 guys. The shortest player is
6'4", right?
Their
starters.
Is Owe at 6'4". Yeah. Everybody else 6'5" and above. So
it's funny because they don't have like huge size inside. I mean, they got their 4 is a 6'7", and then they're 6'10". But yeah,
they're one injury returnee away from having 4 guys that are 6'10" or 6'11". Yeah. So they do have some legit size as well, but it's also size across the board, positionally, every spot. This is a big team. Even Lowe is the one guy when he's back. We'll see about that. He's the one guy who's kind of a conventional guard size, but otherwise, this is a very big team, and that poses challenges. You got to match up with that.
Yeah, we saw it last year against Auburn for Michigan State.
Yep,
they
that's
really
right.
struggled against that, and we've seen a response from Michigan State to get a lot more size, both in the portal and then just the recruits.
I think they're better equipped to handle that this year than they were last year, just because you have smaller players. They might not be better players at this point, but being replaced by, Jordan Scott, Trey Fort
Right.
to an extent, Divine Ugachukwu. These are bigger guys than the guys they're replacing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So who do you have as your player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter for the Wildcats?
Really a tough choice here.
Yeah, I've been interested in this one.
If you look at Kentucky's stats in the early going, what you see is a lot of balance in terms of scoring. So I think there are, at least 3 very legitimate choices that you couldn't be wrong with. But I'm going to go with Aberdeen just because he's the guy who's got a little more on him. And I think as we turn to the keys next, I think it's very important, his matchups when he's at the point. So he is their leading scorer narrowly. Sure. So it's defensible from that perspective as well. But I'm going to go with Aberdeen just because I think he's going to be asked to do a little bit more for Kentucky.
All right. So then the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids brings us who cleans the glass best. This is right now I'm ahead 2-1, which means you get to pick. So far the home court advantage here, whoever picks first has won all these challenges. We'll do, of course, continue our snake draft. Who do you have for Michigan State?
That would be Jackson Kohler.
I'm shocked at that pick. So this is going to be tricky, I think, right now, because I think I can talk myself into so many different choices. It's just really a matter of can you pick the right ones to catch up to Jackson Kohler.
Yeah.
And I feel like this may hinge on if a game Kohler gets in foul trouble, that'll sort of throw off our rhythm here. But I think I expect a little bit more from Cone Carr this game. I'll go with Carr, and I'll go with, I think Cam Ward. I think with the size, he'll be playing a little bit more. And I don't know, maybe you're welcome to take Cooper, whoever else you want, I guess.
Oh, I'm taking Cooper. I'm not even thinking twice. No, I will say this. I think that the Cohen Carr choice is a good one. And I was kind of hoping you were going to leave him because I think let's put it this way. If he responds the way I would expect him to after hearing about it from Izzo, not just in the post-game press conference, but likely every day in practice between these 2 games about how he didn't rebound against San Jose State, then I think that's a good choice. But I'm going to go with Coop. So I've got the 2 starting bigs. I'll take that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, I think you can't go wrong. I mean, honestly, Kohler is the most important piece, and then after that I almost think
you're trying to piece together what other 2 guys can I pick and get it right. As we talked about, it's tougher this year because the stratification is not as obvious. You've got 3 or even 4 guys that on a given night behind Kohler could be your second best rebounders and third best. And so you're trying to cobble together that combination that's going to outstrip whatever Kohler and the other guy does. And that's tough.
Yeah.
Because you got to hit on the right, last game, if like me, I think I had Cohen Carr.
Yeah.
And he had 4 rebounds. He didn't do enough,
Yeah.
So you don't know from game to game how that's going to go with those other guys. Kohler is kind of, where the floor is probably 6 or 7. That's about the worst you could ever see him doing.
Right.
But the other guys you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, right now the guys average a double. So it's going to be rough to catch up and exceed what he does. So of course that's brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. So make sure when you're watching Michigan State clean the glass that you think about your own windows, your house. They'll come out, they'll do a nice gentle power wash. They can also wash your windows from the inside and the outside, the screens, blinds, whatever you need done, whatever it is, whether it's your house, your business, apartment complex, whatever the job is, they've even taken care of the state capitol. So contact the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids today. You get 15% off. You contact them and mention Final Four. Head to our support page at tffinonts.com/support to find the necessary links to get a hold of Troy and his team. They've done my house. I couldn't be happier. My wife is super happy. So contact me today. You'll be very glad you did. Which brings us to the 5 keys of the game, brought to you by Nudge Printing. And this is another reminder that we're running on about 2 weeks left in this competition. So you get to go to nudgeprinting.com/win. And there you can enter for free for a hooded sweatshirt, which is the same super comfortable hooded sweatshirt like I'm wearing now. I think it's probably even the same green. I'm not sure if that Kelly green, but it says Tom Frickin' Izzo. Again, it's totally free. The drawing costs you nothing. Head over there, enter. You just have to enter your email address or something like that. You get an opportunity. We'll announce the winner of that drawing after the North Carolina pregame, so before the North Carolina game, and then we'll start our next drawing for the following month. So head over to Nudge Printing right now, and then you can, of course, get any other selection you want. The coupon code you want to use is TFFINOTS, TIFNOTS. At checkout, that gives you 20% off anything for your purchase. And again, just tons of stuff, all high quality gear you will be very happy with. So the first key of the game, and I sort of alluded to this earlier in the sort of the preamble, is Madison Square Gardens, the MSG. Michigan State, not good there. They're 0-4 in the Champions Classic. They even lost to Rutgers a couple years ago at MSG when Rutgers was down a play and they weren't very good. They did win last year though, and they've won, I think, the NCAA tournament at some point.
Yeah, well, they had a huge win. It's kind of gotten forgotten because the aftermath of it was a loss in the Elite Eight to UConn in a year where Michigan State probably should have won the national title. In 2014, Gary Harris's sophomore year, right. That team, Adrian Payne, Keith Appling, Denzel Valent, all the Brendan Dawson, loaded team, had no business using a UConn. But the game before that, they played and beat number 1 seed Virginia in a classic. Right, yeah. I mean, that was an all-out war against Virginia. And MSU came away with the win. I believe that was the Madison Square. It had to be Madison Square Garden. Yeah, because I know they lost to UConn there. So It's not as if MSU's never won there. They won there last year against Rutgers, played reasonably well. That was a game where Cohen Carr was really good guarding Ace Bailey. Jace Richardson scored what was then a career-high 20 points. That was one of his breakout games offensively, right at the point where he was starting to turn the corner from being a really interesting freshman that was helping a lot more than people anticipated to, oh, that's the guy. That's the best player on their team. It was around that time that he started to assert himself that way. But so again, it's not like they've never won there, but the history is not great as compared to a lot of other venues. You'd feel better if this game was in the United Center or in Indianapolis, because MSU's had, especially in the Champions Classic, they're 0-4 at Madison Square Garden. So you can look at it two ways. You can either say, boy, I don't like that trend, or you could say, man, they're overdue. So we'll see which it is. I don't put a lot, I'm raising this one mostly for fun. I don't put a lot of stock in it. I really don't. Because it's a different team especially these days. It's a different team every year. But I know there are fans out there who give in to superstition. And if you do, Madison Square Garden is not your favorite building.
Right. And also they may think that because we're going to watch the game in person at Madison Square Garden, that this
I'd rather not harp on that, but that might be something that gets some discussion in our world.
I'm looking very fortunate. I like I mentioned before, I've never been to New York. I've never been to Madison Square Garden, obviously.
I've only been once. I've been there.
I had always assumed that Madison Square Garden was just a basketball arena. I had no idea there's all this other stuff there.
Well, they play hockey there too. The Rangers.
Well, yeah, but they have they have other venues in the same garden, right? It's not just the one building. Like they have a concert at the same time. I didn't realize that. I thought it was just like a basketball arena and that was it. I did not realize there's all this other stuff.
They do big concerts in the major complex as well. Yeah. It's not the original Madison Square Garden. So there's that. But it's, I feel like I can say this as somebody who's actually born in that city. I have family that lives there now. My family, up until my sisters and I, had all lived in New York after we came to this country. So I feel like I'm justified in saying I do not buy into the whole mecca of basketball hype. I know for me, their buildings, Breslin means a lot more to me The Palace meant a lot more to me.
Uh-huh.
I don't get hyped up in Mecca of basketball, all that shit. Look, New York loves basketball. There's no getting around that. It's this, as they said way back in the 70s, I think, coined it. It's the city game. And
Yeah.
New York really takes that. And look, we're happy. We've got a guy coming in next year who's a product of that city, Josiah
Yep.
Jervis. So it's not that. It's just, I think that it tends to be focused more in the NBA, where people go bonkers with that stuff. Like, you got to be at your best when you're playing at MSG. No, come on. It's not that big a deal, mostly because the Knicks historically, not a great franchise.
Yeah.
But not consistently so, at least. So, like I say, I don't buy into all that stuff, but is it a cool experience for kids who maybe like you have never been to New York, which I imagine there probably are multiple guys on MSU's team who probably haven't been. Well, maybe even this year. Yeah, I guess some of them were there last year, but still, it's a unique experience in that way. It is a pro arena, so there's that. But this event is always played in big arenas,
right?
Well, so the United Center, Bankers, wherever.
Yeah. Or in
so
Atlanta,
it's not unusual.
Yeah. I would think, especially with the pro aspect of the arena, it probably isn't, aside from being a little bit bigger, it's probably doesn't feel a whole lot different now than a lot of these college arenas that are just, their locker rooms are nicer. They've got all kinds of things. So I don't think from a many standpoint, it's be a huge, jump up.
I think the biggest difference is what you and I were talking about before we went on the air. It's the layout of the buildings is different. We talk about this in the Big Ten, right? I think one of the major mistakes that Ohio State made when they moved out of oh God, why am I drawing a blank on what their field house was called? Anyway, St. John's Arena. When they moved out of there and they moved into what is now Value City, I think still. I can't keep up with the sponsors always, but I think
furniture company else, right.
Yeah, Schottenstein Center, I think is the other name it goes by. But the problem Ohio State has is that building feels like a pro building. And what people mean by that is the crowd is not on top of you the way that it often is in a college arena. College arenas typically are a little smaller. So a standard like high major college arena capacity is probably in the 14 to 15,000 range. Some like Rupp at Kentucky get bigger, but for the most part, that's fair. Whereas a pro capacity is probably more around 20. And I'm roughly stated, but you get the point.
Yeah.
And the layout is different. Something John Calipari talked about the other night with coming into Breslin for the first time was the way that Michigan State does some other things to make it even better than it would be otherwise. But the way that the students are right on top of you, right around the court, they're there. You don't get that. It's hard to have, I would say it's impossible to have quite that effect in an arena like Madison Square Garden, even if you were playing as the home team. Yeah. It's just different. The fans are not as close to you. And so that does have an impact on the atmosphere, I think. And that plus sometimes as a result of that, you will hear guys talk about, although this is more of a factor in domes, but you will hear guys talk about the difference in the shooting background.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I mean, the biggest difference, of course, is you watch pro games and they are boring in the sense that there's just no fan engagement outside of playoffs, right? When people are engaged throughout the entire game. I feel like you watch a lot of these games, it doesn't really get.
It depends. It depends on right now. I think the Pistons have a pretty good environment, it seems to me, because they're winning and they're doing it in all sorts of weird ways with weird lineups and all of that. But generally speaking, I know what you're saying. It's a different thing. Yeah.
Just a different atmosphere. You don't have people who have nothing better to do than just sit around and scream like a maniac and stand up the entire game. Right. People actually have jobs and stuff who are sitting in the front. All right. So let's move on to the second key of the game, which is the boards. This is obviously going to be a real battle. We got two good rebounding teams. Kentucky is 47th in offensive rebounding percentage and 13th in defensive, while Michigan State is 8th in offensive rebounding and 22nd on defense.
Yeah, it's a It's a good test, much like Arkansas was. I think the difference here is that Arkansas had evidenced some weakness on its defensive glass, and boy, did we see that come to fruition. Michigan State with a plus 50% offensive rebounding rate in that game.
Yeah.
Going to be hard to do it at that level here because Kentucky is, like Michigan State, good at both ends. I would say if either team is able to carve out an advantage here, that's a big plus in the win column.
And third key to the game is the point guard. You already mentioned, Kentucky is missing their starting point guard. Basically, they have a secondary ball handler who's going to be the point guard. And of course, Michigan State, it's Jeremy Fears.
Yeah. And look, as I've said, Aberdeen and Johnson have looked fine to me. I haven't seen evidence that it's a problem in terms of, wow, this is going to be something that takes Kentucky, from a team that they thought could maybe play on the last weekend of the season to, out of the top 25. It's not that kind of thing. But neither guy is low, their projected and expected starter either. So two things can be true at the same time. It can be a situation that to one extent or another is probably manageable with the guys they have, but it's still not what they would want it to be. And those guys are going up against a player in Jeremy Fears who has some flaws, but in the ways that count the most to me, I don't know that I would want to trade him for anybody right now. And I know that sounds extreme, but for a Tom Izzo team, for Michigan State basketball, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a guy who fits the role better than Jeremy Fears. And he is built to cause this Kentucky team problems in a couple main ways. Defensively, he is going to be a pest. I would expect that he is going to get into whomever he's guarding, as we've seen him do, and try to be disruptive. Yep. Not gambling or anything. We know that. But just really trying to wear them down, create some havoc, and make life generally tough on them. And then at the other end, he's going to push tempo. He's going to look to make plays for his guys, and that will create issues. Kentucky's going to have to deal with him. They're going to have to try to contain him, prevent him from being a facilitator the way that he normally is. And then the third thing I would mention is I don't know whether we were talking about it yesterday in the Ethan Taylor episode or what, but I know at some point I was talking about how I have to believe that now that Jeremy has fully become Jeremy Fears, it's his team.
Yeah.
Unquestionably, whereas last year he was in a leadership role, but not the same thing.
Yeah. Right.
I don't think there's going to be any fan base in the Big Ten that likes him. And I mean, even can tolerate him. He is an agitator.
Yeah.
And Kentucky's going to have to deal with that as well. So, and I think he's a guy who gets off on big moments. So I think he's going to be jacked.
I agree.
It's an interesting test here both ways. The flip side of it is if Jeremy is guarding those guys, and he's going to have to because there's not really a better choice for him to guard somebody else physically, he's given up some size. So how does he counter that?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say if you went into a lab and created the ideal point guard for Tom Izzo, you probably would be, you'd about get Jeremy Fears, maybe just add a couple inches, maybe a little bit better shooting. But outside of that, everything else that really matters, he's like checks every box.
Absolutely. And that's why, even though he might have a game like he did against Arkansas where he's 0 for 7 from the floor, and Tom Izzo doesn't care.
Yeah.
And he's the only guy who came away unscathed after the San Jose State game. He is doing, when you watch him, just go back to what the conversation, and I know this is a hobby horse for me and for other people, but go back to what the sideline conversations would be between Tom Izzo and Jeremy's predecessor at the point, and look at what they are now. Like, I'm not saying Izzo's never going to lean on him and post him up. He will. But those are different. That is a point guard and a coach in sync. Those two guys. And you see it evidenced in a million ways, but one of the most obvious ones is when they're having those in-game conversations. You aren't seeing a lot of the player trying to defend himself and explain himself. You're seeing two guys on exactly the same page.
Yeah. No, that's 100% right. Yeah, which is unusual. It's easy to forget that he's a redshirt sophomore, right? I mean, I think that's
Cassius obviously was in sync with his coach.
Yep.
Probably
that took a while.
Sophomore year on. Yeah, but it took a while. It did take a while. But it's different. Like Cassius was a very different player than Jeremy.
Yeah,
and for as great as Cassius was, and he's one of the all-time greats at this school. He is not the built in a lab Izzo point guard that Jeremy is. There's two guys who are that mold. Mateen Cleaves and now Jeremy Fierce.
Yeah.
They're the only ones.
So the fourth key to the game is transition. Obviously, it's always important for Michigan State to get going and get as much as they can, especially for as much as they've been struggling shooting any sort of easy basket you can get against Kentucky. They did show some vulnerability in the fast break against Arkansas too. So there's that aspect of it too, which we don't usually talk about a whole lot.
Both teams have issues there. We saw what Michigan State did. They struggled. And a lot of that was against Arkansas, but a lot of that was a result of not just turnovers, but the types of turnovers they were committing. They were live ball turnovers that Arkansas was able to convert into layups and dunks at the other end. That is not typically a Michigan State problem. Mark Pope was very unhappy with the way Kentucky defended in transition against Louisville. And I saw a lot of that, get a decent amount of that game. And the difference there is what he was most unhappy about, from what I gathered, is that they weren't getting back and locating and closing on shooters. Louisville was able to get a lot of open threes. Yeah. I don't know how much of a factor that will be in this game. Ideally, if Michigan State were its normal self, it would be something we'd be talking about. So both teams have had issues already in the high-level game that they've played with getting back. And that, as you say, that's not typically a problem for Michigan State. I don't know enough about Mark Pope historically to know whether that's been a chronic issue. I gather it has not been. So same thing is with the rebounding. We've got two teams where they feel like playing fast can be a strength. If either one is able to carve out an advantage here, that's a big positive in terms of trying to get the win.
All right, so the fifth and final key to the free throw line, I got to imagine it. Michigan State's got to be sub 70%, aren't they? Because I don't think they've shot 70%.
Yes, they haven't hit 70 yet in a game.
Yeah, so
that's right.
This has been a couple players problem. I feel like the last game was mainly just Carson Cooper, who he was he missed half his free throws. So they obviously got to get better. They were really good last year. They have largely the same crew coming back outside of maybe like Ford and Scott, I guess, and Ward, but they should be better than they are, and they have to in a game like this.
Well, the big thing is that, two of the guys who get there a lot, Carson Cooper and Cohen Carr, have not been as dialed in yet as they were last year. So that's, if you get those guys shooting at the levels they were a year ago, and remember, for both of them, it wasn't a wire-to-wire act, especially with Cohen. He got steadily better as the year went on. So there's no reason I saw another MSU podcast. I didn't listen to it because I can't listen to a lot of that stuff, but no offense, but
sorry, we're not naming it by name. So that's right.
But the person apparently was, I saw enough in the headline to say, yeah, it's not good. And I don't expect it to get better. Well, come the F on.
Right. I
mean, again, all I got to do is go back to last year and look at how much better Cohen Carr and Carson Cooper were in March than they were in November. That can happen again. I expect it to happen to one degree or another. Here's the thing, though. The way these teams play, we talked about Kentucky offensively being a tough cover, and they are. And it's interesting to me, though, that for a team that has good athleticism and a lot of guys who have skills offensively, they don't do much to create pressure on the opposing defense. They are in the 200s in offensive foul rate, meaning the number of free throw attempts they're shooting as compared to field goal attempts. Right. And they're number 200 on the defensive end, so they're fouling a lot. Now, maybe you can say that might be a result of one game tilting the balance, that Louisville played so well and put so much pressure on them that it skewed the numbers. Maybe, but it's all we've got to go on. Whereas Michigan State is picking up right where they left off a year ago. They are top 50 in offensive foul rate, and they're top 75 in defensive foul rate. That is not neither of those numbers are historically Tom Izzo team numbers, but they do line up with what they did last year. So we are seeing a continuation. MSU's not fouling an excessive amount. And really, they didn't against Arkansas, which is a team that is built to put pressure on you.
Right.
And MSU did a pretty damn good job of defending without fouling. They're going to have to do that again here. They're going to have to get to the line. That has not been a problem, getting to the line. The problem's been making enough of them. So if MSU does those things, if they have a significant advantage in chances and they're shooting decently, again, another factor that could be in their favor in terms of getting a win. So something to watch for, because at least with the little tiny bit of data we've got, it looks like a big advantage for MSU.
Yeah, going back to the Michigan State shows, I just want to touch that for just a second. It shocks me. Are there a lot of people looking for content that just gets them like riled up and excited and like clickbaity? I don't understand. I've never understood those shows. I mean, I guess my point is that what people look for, seek out, or is it just that tends to be the people who tend to, have those kind of shows and things like that? They tend to be sort of like fanatic that put the antic in fanatic, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like
little bit of both. I mean, look, negativity is always considered to be the tried and true way of gathering eyeballs or ears in media. I mean, all you got that it doesn't take much to demonstrate that as a truism, right? We all know this. But yeah, it's just like, to me, that, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I saw that the other day, and it's not a show I ever listen. I don't listen to much other MSU content. And no offense to anybody else, but I just don't. But that one really caught my attention because it was in the title, so I saw it. I didn't have to listen to it to know what was going on. And I said, wait a minute. We're 3 games in from guys that have done it before. And that's the thing. You need to understand that the reason the team's numbers are where they are is primarily due to those 2 players.
Exactly.
Jeremy Fierce has shot well. Jackson Kohler has shot well.
Yeah.
Some of the other guys, Cam Ward has not shot well, but Jordan Scott has struggled, but those guys don't shoot enough to where it's making a big impact, right?
Right.
So it really is. It's down to those 4 guys. Those 4 veterans are going to be the ones who determine it. And 2 of them are shooting up to par, and 2 of them aren't. And the 2 that aren't are guys that you expect to be better, and I think will be better. So to say, I don't think it's going to get a lot, okay. That's not based in anything except vibes. It's just not, because there's no concrete evidence that you could point to say, well, yeah, it's just unlikely to get better. No, you'd probably cut the other way. It's like I was saying about the Kentucky kid who struggled a little bit this year. Odds are pretty good that he's going to find it at some point. Right. You're just hoping it's not Tuesday night.
Who do you see as Michigan State's free throw leader at the end of the season? Like, shoot some more free throws. Because I'm a little surprised that Cooper's had as many as he had. I mean, he definitely draws contact and gets fouled, but I would have expected Kohler or Carr to be leading that. I'm guessing right now that Cooper shot more than anyone else.
Well, he shot 10 the other night. That helps.
Yeah, I mean that's
yeah. I would probably look, I would put it this way. If he's consistently playing the way he needs to, I would say Cohen Carr is a good bet.
Yep.
But really, it could be any of those four, because we know Jeremy Fears has a knack for drawing fouls.
Yep.
And he's looking to put pressure on Izzo. He's going to shoot a lot. Jackson Kohler, just by virtue of him being the rebounder that he is, put aside the fact that, you know, he likes to try to play in the post sometimes as well. Mm-hmm. Jackson Kohler is going to get opportunities. Carson gets opportunities because of his activity level. You know, when you've got him rim diving as much as MSU does, well, one way that rim dives get dealt with is guys just start fouling them.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but if I had to pick one, I would pick Cohen, because Cohen's the guy, if he's playing the right way consistently enough, is going to put the most pressure on a defense.
Yeah.
At the basket, and that's normally where you're getting fouled.
I agree. And I also think maybe with Cohen too, you're going to expect more minutes from him than some of the other players too, which just gives you more opportunity, obviously, to get fouled.
Yeah.
So it'll be very exciting going to New York for our first time. We're going to go to Madison Square Garden. We're going to go see some stuff. I hear New York's kind of a big city, so we'll see. I expect we'll be able to see most of the city in the day. Is that probably accurate?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this. The one thing about Manhattan, at least, which of course is not all of New York City by any means, but it's the thing most people think of first. It is pretty walkable. Now, going north to south, that's a stretch, but going east to west, yeah, you can do it.
Yeah. So I listened to one of the other podcasts I listened to. It's an American Revolution podcast. And so it's interesting when they, talk about Washington's escape out of New York and going these Manhattan Islands and Harlem Heights and all these battles, because it's all just like empty countryside and just kind of hard. Now you look at it.
It is something else. And
all cement, right? And pavement.
I do think about that, how in the 17th and even 18th and part of the 19th centuries, parts of Manhattan were considered the sticks. It hadn't developed yet, and the other thing that's the advantage of being a city as old by American standards as New York is that you have entire neighborhoods that no longer exist.
Right.
So what I mean by that, for example, if anybody's ever seen the film Gangs of New York, well, Gangs of New York, that film was based on a book called Gangs of New York, which I highly recommend if you have any interest in history, especially from the 18th and 19th centuries. The 5 Points was a neighborhood in New York, roughly around where Chinatown and Little Italy is now, that used to exist. It was a slum. That's all. It was where immigrants went. It was, tenements, every cliche you've ever thought of, that's where it was. And it was, of course, the center of vice and, gambling halls, bars, drinking, prostitution, all of those things. Wild stuff. There's another great book on New York City history called Low Life. I bet you didn't think you were going to get book recommendations, listeners.
You get everything, here. This is great. Yeah.
I can't recommend that book highly enough. If you have any interest in American history or urban history from the 19th century, it's fantastic. But New York City, at a certain point, the neighborhood was so unmanageable that they just took it out of existence. They bulldozed it, under. Just eliminated it. So this neighborhood that had this rich history for well over, so probably more like 2 centuries, just gone, doesn't exist anymore. It's other neighborhoods that exist where it once was. So that's what New York gives you something of, and other places like Boston do too, I guess.
Sure.
But we're such a young country that that's the closest we get to old history, is a place like New York. So it's very interesting to me, at least. Actually, when I was at MSU, I did my senior paper as a history major. You had to do a paper at the end, kind of like a senior thesis type thing.
Sure.
It was a research project you had to do. And mine was on police corruption in New York City in the late 19th century. So it's a subject that I do know a little bit about.
That's great. Well, it was at one time our nation's capital too, just for a couple of years, I think, before it moved to Philadelphia and then eventually to Washington, D.C. So we will be back after the game, I don't know when that is. So we have to get back to our place after the game. We have to decide how long we want to watch the Kansas Duke game too. And so it might be really late when we do our show, but we will be by at some point. So, whether you want to join us or not, that's great. Whether you're a Kansas fan or sorry, Kentucky fan or Michigan State, obviously you're more than welcome. Head on over to our YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when those happen. And then we'll obviously have the audio come out as well. Again, reminder to check out Nudge Printing, nudgeprinting.com/win to enter the drawing for the free sweatshirt. You'll be very glad you did. You can also check out other stuff there too. And always head to our support page if you need anything else from our sponsors. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.